Hi everyone, welcome to Let's Talk About It. I am Marquita Mansfield and I'm sitting here with Erica Wilson from the Olive Branch Counseling Center. So today we'll be talking about mental health and the stigma surrounding it. So for starters, let's tell the viewers what does stigma even mean?
My definition of stigma itself is something that someone's afraid of talking about. They don't want to talk about it. They think it's taboo, or it's something they're afraid they don't want to have. They don't want to just to have a discussion about it. Or maybe
Yes.
they just don't think it's real. And that's my definition of stigma around really anything, but especially mental health.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, with mental health, like what are some examples of some stigmas surrounding it?
Mental health stigma is where a lot of people, especially in our culture and day and age, think that maybe it's just not really happening, or maybe it's something you can just get over. For example, if you have anxiety, maybe you should just take a walk, or what do you have to be anxious about? You have a great life. There's nothing for you to be worried about. There's nothing wrong with you. Those are a lot of things that I hear. And then from adults, maybe it's because it's the way they were parented, it was the way they were raised, and then it just goes back to generation to generation. And then now we're living in an age of where everybody is wanting to talk more about it, which is a great thing. And it's just opening our eyes more to what actually is mental health and what actually is a chemical imbalance and how real it is. And
Right.
breaking that stigma is us talking about it, like today, bringing light to what it actually is and how
Right.
it's not, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right, and just imagine someone reaching out, but their feelings are being minimized. And like you mentioned, oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you, or, suck it up, buttercup, things of that sort. They're reaching out only to have their feelings minimized and for them, in a sense, feel that how I feel, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And it's sad that this doesn't just come from family members, it comes from people in the community, even teachers, So, so what are some false misunderstandings regarding stigma?
It doesn't, if you have a mental health disorder, it does not mean something's wrong with you. The falseness that comes with that is someone who comes in for professional help, or someone who even thinks that it's time to seek out professional help. They have this mindset of, well, then that automatically means something is wrong with me. I like to say that it actually means that you're stronger than you think you already are. When you're
Right.
reaching out for help is where, okay, I notice something is going on with me. Something's a little off with me. I'm grieving. I'm feeling a certain way. I feel sad more than I am happy. I'm having these symptoms of anxiety. I'm ready to get help. That is the biggest step you can take, and it's a brave one. So the falseness that people are putting into this world is, well, if you go and get help and you have a diagnosis of a mental health disorder, something's wrong with you. And that, to me, is the biggest false statement that is being spread around.
Right. And I've even had some people to not seek mental health counseling just because, okay, that's going to be on my record,
Right. Right.
So, but we'll be right back on Let's Talk About It. Hi there, welcome back to Let's Talk About It. So, in the school setting, like how does mental health stigma, like how does it affect the way that mental illness, for example, is even addressed?
In the school setting, correct?
Yes.
So in the school setting, there are lines that can't be crossed, and there are boundaries that really can't be crossed in a school setting.
Yeah.
Very different from what you and I do in private practice. I'm going to speak a little bit about both sides. I was a school counselor, middle school counselor for years, so I've seen that side, and I've also seen the private practice side. When there's mental health, school counselors wear so many hats
Oh,
in
yeah.
those schools. And maybe they have a caseload of 500 kids in their grade. So they're not going to reach every kid as far as mental health goes. However, they do these large group counseling sessions or guidance lessons where they're talking specifically about mental health issues. So mental health is being touched on in the school setting. It just is considered a short-term counseling relationship. It is not considered a long-term counseling relationship. So if you have a child who maybe feels as though they're in a school setting that doesn't have school counselors that are reaching out for individual counseling, checking on kids who are dealing with mental health issues, that means you need to get your child long-term counseling, which is where they would reach out to someone like the two of us, where we're going to be able to provide long-term counseling and treatment. And then the school counselor in the school setting is going to be able to provide that short-term follow-up, short-term check-ins.
Right. So what are some topics that, your guidance counselor will discuss in the group setting?
When I was in the school setting, we talked about prevention of suicide. We talked about drug abuse and substance abuse. We discussed bullying and actually what bullying and targeting is. This year, I believe they are talking about gun violence and safety, which is a big thing that we're hearing in our world today. And then another thing is usually where school counselors and guidance counselors are going into these group settings at first and discussing what is mental health, what the school counselor's role is in helping with mental health, because they are there in the building to help initially, to be able to guide you as the student and as the family members to say, this is what's going on with your student. This is the path we need to take. They have suggestions. I suggest this child has long-term counseling with an outside therapist. Maybe this child needs to be hospitalized based on their mental health needs. So school counselors are the ones that are on the front of the lines. They're the ones seeing these kids, and they're the ones also trying to work really hard to break that mental health stigma. But again, in a school setting, there are lines and boundaries that can't be crossed,
Right.
because we're looking at state funds, we're looking at laws that are
Yes.
put into place for these school counselors.
How receptive do you think that students are, when they're involved and we're just participating in groups?
It's difficult. So it depends on the age group. It depends on in certain areas. So large group guidance counseling is where every kid in that grade, or maybe every kid in that PE class, is coming in together to hear this guidance lesson. Small groups is where there's a need. Maybe there's about 6 to 8 kids who have interest in learning about anxiety, and they've shown that interest and told that interest to the counselor. The counselor then develops a curriculum of talking about specific anxiety disorders and helping that small group of kids with their anxiety. But large group guidance class is where I was talking about. They're talking about self-harm, drugs, gun violence, bullying. They're talking about all those things with the whole school.
So, and I know a lot of individuals, especially, the parents, they might not realize like the broad scope of a guidance counselor in their role. So is there like any type of orientation, to the guidance counselor as far as what they do, so that way someone can know, okay, well, in the event that my child might be experiencing something, just having that conversation?
Yes, absolutely. Reach out to your schools. Get to know who your school counselor is. What do they offer as the school counselor? The school district I was in, we would do like a parent night.
Oh,
and so
good.
the school counselors would have their little table set up. We would have a brochure of what all we listed out for the parents to know what we provided for the students. And then we would talk to the parents, because we do have parents that would call us and say, my child's grandfather just passed away. If you notice something different, or please let the teachers know, they may be a little more sad today. They may be a little more slower getting their work done today. Make sure you're just checking on them. And if you don't mind, if they're talking to the school counselor, if you don't mind pulling them in today just to check on them. So I would really advise for parents or guardians to reach out to their school counselor, because every school district is going to be different in how they handle that.
So how do you think that mental health, just a stigma, like how does it impact someone's mental health?
The stigma itself is the hard part. It is where people are being belittled by the people that they love or the people within their community, and they feel as though, well, maybe I don't have a problem. Maybe the problem is me. Maybe I'm making this up in my mind. So the stigma itself is dangerous, because if that person who truly has a chemical imbalance or a mental health disorder isn't reaching out to get help because of people saying that, no, I don't think there's really a problem here. I don't think there's really a way to get help for that. That's preventing that person from reaching out and getting professional help and seeing a healthier, happier them.
So what about even how, mental health, the mental illness is being diagnosed? So where does that stigma play a role into that?
If there is a person who's had to seek out mental health treatment and there is a true chemical imbalance that calls for a diagnosis, and let me say, when you're seeking out therapy, you're not always going to leave that therapy session with a diagnosis. A lot of people are afraid, I'm going to leave this therapy session with a diagnosis slapped on me, and that's just not how it works. But if a lot of people are getting these diagnoses and they're afraid that it's going to affect them in a negative way, you must remember HIPAA, which is a privacy law, and confidentiality. What is going on in that therapy session and what your diagnosis is belongs to you, and only that therapist may know about it.
Right.
There are a lot of people that have to break a lot of different things to get in to find out what you've been diagnosed with.
Right. And back to the privacy, I mean, a lot of clients, they don't realize how protected, they are. I mean, we're bound by, our ethics and,
Right.
all of that stuff. And it's sad that can be the determining factor whether they seek counseling or not, because they may have had a bad
Right.
Us therapists, we're all different, so, but that's sad that can be a determining factor on whether they decide to move forward with any
Sure.
type of therapy.
Sure.
So, okay. Well, we will be right back on Let's Talk About It. Hi there, welcome to Let's Talk About It. So what can individuals do to just overcome the mental health stigma, like in their communities?
That's a great question. Overcoming mental health stigma is something I advocate for any of my clients or people that I know who are afraid to talk about what mental health is. So I would say just that. I want these people to learn what mental health is. Mental health is actually getting help, helping yourself. Mental health disorders are different than mental health. So health is, I am healthy. I'm working on myself. I'm working on my mind. I'm working on my anxiety and my depression or my bipolar, whatever it may be. You're getting that help. So mental health is health. Mental health issues, mental health disorders, that's the stigma. That's the thing that people are so afraid of. And if we could look at it as mental health being like health, as in I have a cold,
Yes.
I'm going to go to the doctor. My mind's not quite right. I'm not thinking clearly. I'm having negative thoughts. Why wouldn't you seek out a professional for that? So that's the stigma we need to break.
Right, and when we put it, along those lines, it clicks for some people, but for some, it's just that stigma is still there. I don't care, how you, address it or how you say it. I still think that if someone diagnosed me with, said condition, I'm defined by that,
Right.
and that's just how I am. So, if possible, how can you slowly but surely possibly undo that person's way of thinking?
It has to go back to them caring for themselves enough to know that what they're doing for themselves by reaching out for help for whatever their condition may be, whatever their diagnosis may be.
Right.
It isn't a label they have to wear on their forehead. It isn't a label that they have to carry around with them.
Right.
It is just something that is a part of them. It isn't who they are.
Right.
A lot of people do feel, like you said, defined by that diagnosis. And if you have that mindset, then you are going to feel that way. But if you change your mindset into thinking, this is just a part of who I am, it's a part of my personality, it's something I'm working on, it's something I'm coping with,
Right.
it's something I'm managing, and I'm doing it successfully.
Right. And I know for me, before I even became, even started college and just, started taking courses, I had somewhat of an ignorant innocence, if that makes sense, because just, with my upbringing, with my family, well, hey, if you needed to see, a therapist or somebody, you're crazy.
Right.
So I actually, subscribed myself to that until I actually got into that realm and it just made sense for me. So now that I am a mental health professional, I can better educate. I mean, starting with my family, you know, and also starting with my small family, you know, with my kids, you know, having that space of communication, you know, if there's something going on, it's nothing wrong with you. You're just having a challenging time, and here are some resources that, you know, you can better cope with it, you know, and even with my clients. Like I remember one time I casually mentioned, you know, my therapist, you know, during the therapy session, and my client was like, you have a therapist?
Right.
A therapy has a therapist has a therapist. And once I broke it down and just allowed them to understand why I have someone, I was like, think about it. You know, I carry a lot of people's, you know, challenges. So I need to ground myself. You know, that's therapy, that's my self-care. Yeah. So I think when a lot of people, you know, realize that, you know, therapists, we're not robots. Yeah. We see people too. We need people to hold space for us the same way we hold space for countless others. And I think it starts with that, you know. But I'm so happy, with, you know, with where it is being brought to the forefront. But I feel that we have such, you know, a long, long way to go.
Right.
So.
Well, when we are real with our clients, it makes us a real person to them.
Yeah.
I think they think because we are mental health professionals, we have it all together, but we need help too.
Right.
And we don't take shame in that, but we've learned how healthy that is for us. And it's important for us to teach our clients that too.
Right, right. And even, you know, I think about like my brief phone consultations. I just give them just a good idea of what they're, you know, looking into. It's not me holding, you know, I have my notepad, don't get me wrong, but I want them to realize that the environment that they're coming into is going to be therapeutic, you know, just that, you know, and just giving them a heads up that we want this space to be as comfortable as possible, because that's what it's all about. Because if you're not comfortable, you know, just talking about anything, you know, it kind of defeats the purpose.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think that's great. And I think being transparent with your clients to an extent, or anyone, is going to help break that stigma of knowing that therapy isn't scary.
Right.
It isn't scary. It's just another form of having a conversation about what you're going through. And we're just the professionals who know about what you're going through professionally, but even personally, we may have been through some of that stuff, to be able to share with them and just take the stigma off of what is therapy going to be.
Right.
Therapy is us talking about you and helping you find the safe, healthy tools to get you back to where you need to be.
Right, and it definitely has, to me, it has a positive, you know, trickle down effect, because, you know, a friend might tell a friend, well, hey, I went to therapy, and it was not all that bad. And just a funny story, I love Starbucks, by the way. I was inside of a Starbucks, and I overheard a barista say, yeah, this is too much. I'm going to call my therapist. I mean, even though that was kind of funny, but it was still brought up in conversation. It was being received, you know, from, you know, the colleagues. So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, we'll be right back on Let's Talk About It. Hi there, welcome back to Let's Talk About It. So a lasting question, what could we do overall to just end stigma as it relates to mental illness?
It's a great question. You know, people need to learn that mental health is all about helping you and helping them. And what we want people to do is talk about it. You talk about, hey, I went and saw a therapist and I've been working with them for a couple of weeks now and I'm starting to feel better. I've been working with a therapist for about a month or two. I'm starting to feel better, because it's not the first time you walk into a therapist's office and you immediately feel better. It just doesn't work that way. It does take time and practice, but you will start to learn, my brain is being rewired. I'm learning a different way of thinking, and I'm not thinking so negatively anymore about what's going on in my life. So talking about it and spreading the word about how mental health therapy, or breaking the stigma of how bad it is to have a diagnosis, is not the bad thing. The bad thing is not seeking out the help. And so that's what we want you to do. We want you to talk about it, and we want you to be able to spread the positivity about what it's done for you and how it's helped.
Right, and I think even a client sharing like their breakthrough, you know, with a family member or a friend, and them realizing, wow, I mean, this really does help, and maybe it's not such a bad thing that whether you're diagnosed, you know, with something or not. I'm just seeing big picture.
Right.
My friend, you know, my sister, my brother, they're not only feeling better, but they're looking better too. So I agree with you. Education is definitely key, and also just kind of weaving it into like your day to day, and it not coming off as being so foreign,
Right?
Because it's
doesn't
not.
have to. Yeah.
It's not. So if you don't mind, share some resources that you may have for our viewers.
I would love to. I work at the Olive Branch Counseling Center, and if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions for you. You can email me at info@theolivebranchcounselingcenter.com. I'll be able to give you some resources for people around your area as well, or maybe just answer those questions. I also have a Facebook page, the Olive Branch Counseling Center. Ask me questions there as well. And then I have a podcast called the Sweet Success Podcast with Erica and Taylor, where we talk all things mental health. And I'd love for you to join and subscribe to that as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. What a wealth of knowledge that you've provided. And like I mentioned before, you're coming back, right?
Oh, 100%.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Take care.